It did not begin with a needle in my thigh. That came later, much later. It began with a baby doll in a crib and my mother's voice whispering in my ear, barely a breath above silence, "This is your destiny, sweetheart." I was 4. At 5, she replaced the dolls with coloring books about pregnancy and family trees. At 7, she started our daily womb sessions, where my older sister Emma and I would wear weighted aprons filled with sand while watching VHS tapes of women giving birth, crying, sweating, screaming. When I asked why, she told me, "One day this will be the most beautiful pain of your life." When I cried that it hurt my back, she added more weight. "Real mothers do not complain, Olivia," she said coldly. "They endure." I spent my childhood in a house wallpapered with baby photos, not of us, but of infants from magazines, fertility clinic brochures, hospital ads, and holiday cards from strangers. My mother was a receptionist at a local fertility clinic and treated her job as if she were God's personal recruiter for motherhood. Every couple she helped conceive was another point of pride, a personal crusade, a moral high ground she never hesitated to proclaim at church or at dinner tables. She spoke of ovaries the way others spoke of soulmates. My sister Emma absorbed it like sunlight. By the time she was 10, she could recite the stages of pregnancy better than the alphabet. At 12, she was volunteering at the clinic with my mother. At 15, she started posting inspirational quotes about motherhood online, calling the womb sacred. I, on the other hand, stayed silent. I learned early that objections were treated as betrayal. So I studied. I read every book I could on biology, ethics, reproductive freedom, and slowly, I built a different world in my mind, a place where motherhood was a choice, not a mandate. I did not plan on becoming a lawyer at first. But the more I saw, the more I read, the more I listened to my mother reduce women to vessels, the more I knew I had to understand the system if I ever wanted to protect myself from it. I wanted to break the cycle. I wanted to matter outside of my uterus. Still, no amount of education prepared me for the night it all came crashing in. I had come home for a dinner my mother insisted was a celebration, though she refused to tell me what for. I arrived to find the house filled with candlelight and soft music playing. Emma was already there, belly swollen with her 5th pregnancy. She looked pale, worn thin, and yet she smiled at me as if she had never been more content. My mother pulled out a chair for me at the head of the table and said, "Tonight is a turning point, my love." I smiled politely, trying not to recoil at the way she looked at me, like a gardener about to tend a long-neglected plot. Then she pulled out a small black case and opened it like it was a jewelry box. Inside was a syringe already filled. "Just a little hormonal support," she said cheerfully, "to get those eggs moving." I laughed. I thought it was a joke. But she was not laughing. Emma stood beside me and gently touched my arm. "Just try it, Olivia. We already found a perfect couple. Their file is in the kitchen." I blinked. "Wait, what? What file? What are you talking about?" That was when my mother lunged forward and drove the needle into my thigh. The burn was immediate, sharp, cold, invasive. I gasped, twisted in my chair, but Emma held my arms firmly. I could feel the fluid flooding my muscle, spreading like a fire beneath my skin. The room blurred. My legs gave out. My mother whispered, "See, it is already working. Your body remembers what it was meant for." And as I fell to the floor, I realized the horrifying truth. This was not family pressure. This was not a bad joke. This was not even misguided love. This was coercion. This was assault. This was the beginning of a war one never asked for but would now have to survive. My name is Olivia Bennett. I am 32 years old, a reproductive rights attorney based in Seattle, and I have spent the last decade building my career on defending women's autonomy. I graduated top of my class from Columbia Law School, clerked for a federal judge, and now I work with a legal nonprofit that helps women escape coercive reproductive situations. I have testified before state committees, written amicus briefs, and led litigation that changed clinic policies across 3 states. I do not wear bright colors, not because I dislike them, but because I do not want to be noticed for anything other than my words. My wardrobe is mostly gray, navy, and charcoal. I do not wear perfume. My voice is steady, my diction crisp. People often call me intimidating. That is fine. It is safer that way. I live alone in a minimalist apartment with white walls and dark wood floors. My books are alphabetized, my dishes all match. My weekends are spent mentoring law students or volunteering at a shelter for women fleeing domestic abuse. My clients know me as relentless, the type who will call a judge at 8 p.m. if she thinks it will save someone. My colleagues think I am tireless, driven, a little cold. None of them know what I come from. None of them have ever met my mother. She used to tell people I was her miracle child, the one who didn't scream during delivery, the one who latched without instruction, the one who was born to be a mother herself. From the time I was old enough to understand speech, she fed me a narrative of sacred destiny. I would carry life, just like she had. I would give her grandchildren, just like Emma did. That was the plan. There was no room for deviation. But I was always the quiet one, the watcher. While Emma beamed during our childhood womb training sessions, I memorized the exits. While Emma practiced writing baby names in cursive, I stared out the window, calculating how many years I would have to endure before college. She loved it, craved it. She believed every word our mother fed her. By the time she turned 18, she had signed her first surrogacy contract through our mother's connections at Blessed Beginnings Fertility Clinic. I watched her walk into that clinic like a bride walking to an altar, and I remember thinking she would never walk back the same. Emma was the golden child, the example, the living proof of maternal perfection. Our mother paraded her around town after each birth, told everyone her daughter was a living saint, a giver of miracles. Meanwhile, I had left home, enrolled in pre-law, and never looked back. I thought distance would save me. I thought my success, my discipline, my self-sufficiency would make my mother proud in a different way. I was wrong. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, she would bring up fertility. Sometimes it was subtle, like a lingering hand on my abdomen, a comment about how I was still young enough. Other times, it was overt, setting a place at the table for the grandchild I should have had by now, or handing me pamphlets from the clinic tucked inside my birthday cards. When I brought boyfriends home, she cornered them with photo albums and asked about their sperm count. Eventually, I stopped bringing anyone. It was easier to be alone than to explain. I did not hate my mother. I pitied her. I told myself she was from another time, another world, where women were taught that their worth was tied to their womb. I thought Emma had chosen that life freely. I thought I could outsmart it, rise above it. But that dinner, when she stabbed me with hormones in the middle of a meal and called it a gift, that was when I understood. This was not cultural. This was not generational. This was obsession. This was entitlement taken to its logical extreme. This was the moment everything changed. The next morning, I woke up in a hospital room with a searing pain in my abdomen and IV fluids dripping beside me. My chart listed severe ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome as the diagnosis. My nurse told me I was lucky they brought me in when they did. Another 12 hours and my organs could have begun shutting down. I blinked, confused, still groggy, trying to speak. My mother was standing at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, looking down at me like I had disappointed her. She did not ask how I felt. She said, calmly, "We only did this because we love you. We didn't want to lose your window. 28 is already late for peak egg retrieval." I pressed the red call button. The nurse came back immediately. One glance at my mother's face and she said, "I need you to step out now." Medical privacy. My mother tried to argue. The nurse raised her voice. "Out, now." And that was the first time someone stood between me and her. That was the first time I realized I was not alone. That I could fight back. I wish I could say the hospital stay ended it. That after nearly losing function in my ovaries, after collapsing at a dinner table with hormones still burning through my veins, I was free from her. But trauma rarely ends in a single act. It festers. It finds new ways to grow. My mother was banned from visiting me in the hospital thanks to a nurse who recognized reproductive coercion when she saw it. A day later, a social worker came in, clipboard trembling in her hand. She had seen my name before. Olivia Bennett, the daughter of Patricia Bennett, a receptionist at Blessed Beginnings. Her discomfort was obvious, like someone who had been in the orbit of a dangerous planet too long to ignore its gravity. She handed me brochures about domestic abuse, quietly asked if I wanted to speak to a detective. I said yes. I thought it would be simple. A police report, a restraining order, a clean break, but nothing was simple with my mother. Detective Richard Hale arrived an hour later, a calm presence in a suit too wrinkled to be new. He introduced himself as part of a task force investigating coercive fertility practices. When I described what happened, his expression hardened. "You're not the first woman to describe something like this," he said. "But we need more. Consent forms, medical records, a pattern." My mother had planned everything to look like care. She used the language of maternal concern. Love as an excuse for intrusion. She had signed forms under my name months before. She had logged into my medical portal using saved credentials on my childhood laptop. I was naive enough to once let her pay for a gynecology visit. That gave her everything she needed. Hale opened a folder with other complaints about the same clinic. Young women, mostly vulnerable, some homeless, some with religious parents, all pushed into fertility treatments through soft manipulation. But the paper trail was clean. Too clean. Everyone had signed. Everyone had passed mental health evaluations. They were willing, on paper. He warned me it would be hard to prove coercion without a confession or a critical mistake. I told him I understood. I did not cry. I was beyond tears. I asked him what the next step was. He said, "Survive the next few days." That was not an exaggeration. Because 2 days after leaving the hospital, while I was recovering at home, I received an invitation. Another dinner. A family reunion to celebrate Emma's 6th pregnancy. The message was worded like an olive branch. But I knew better. Still, I went, not because I wanted to forgive, but because I needed to see what they were planning. I arrived late. The dining room was already full. Emma sat at the end of the table, pale and radiant, a halo of children around her. She looked like a queen in a maternity throne. My mother beamed. She stood and welcomed me with exaggerated affection. "My daughter is here. The prodigal womb returns." Everyone laughed. I did not. I sat, ate little, spoke less, watched, waited. The moment came during dessert. My mother tapped her glass with a spoon. "Time for a little announcement. Olivia has decided to start her journey." She held up a folder, thick, medical-looking. I blinked. No, I hadn't. She continued. "We've secured an appointment for her at the clinic. Same doctor who helped Emma. Such a blessing." Emma smiled, though there was sadness in her eyes. She looked tired, broken. Her skin had lost its glow. Her wrists were wrapped in compression sleeves. My mother placed the folder in front of me. "Go on, open it." Inside were forms. Consent for hormone therapy. Consent for egg retrieval. Letters of recommendation from my firm's managing partners, written in a tone I didn't recognize. Supporting my supposed mental health leave. A forged email from me confirming the appointment. Then the worst page. A letter from a psychiatrist stating that I was suffering from fertility grief, recommending reproductive treatment as therapeutic. The name at the bottom chilled me. Dr. Margaret Whitfield, my mother's friend, a guest at her monthly book club. She had never evaluated me. She had never spoken to me. Yet here was her diagnosis. "This is illegal," I whispered. My mother tilted her head. "No, sweetie. This is love. You are resisting the inevitable." I looked around the table. Some guests looked away. Others smiled politely, complicit. I stood. "I'm leaving." My mother stepped in front of me. "Not until you see this." She held out her phone. A video played. Me, in the hospital, sedated, eyes closed. Captioned, "Preparing for the miracle." Someone had filmed me. I shoved past her, walked out into the night air, heart pounding. My phone buzzed. Messages from unknown numbers. Friends, colleagues, all offering support during my recovery. The lie was spreading. She had launched the campaign. And I knew then I had no time. She would file for medical conservatorship. She would use forged documents, biased evaluations, and well-meaning allies to prove I was unfit to make my own decisions. She would frame it as love. And if I did not act fast, she would win. She always planned long games. But so did I. She just never knew it. The morning after the dinner, I woke to a phone call from my firm's HR department. The woman on the line sounded concerned, overly gentle. "Olivia, we received confirmation from your family that you'll be taking medical leave indefinitely. We're here to support you." My throat tightened. I never requested leave. I never submitted anything. But when I logged into my work email to check, I couldn't. My password had been changed. I clicked reset. The recovery email was no longer mine. My mother had gotten to it. She was cutting off my access. I picked up my phone to call Detective Hale but paused. I had to be strategic now. No more panic, only precision. I opened my private account and emailed a trusted colleague, Fiona Greer, an expert in conservatorship law. I didn't include details, only urgency. "Please, I need to speak with you." She replied within 10 minutes. We scheduled a secure call. While waiting, I sifted through my physical files. In a locked drawer I kept documents, medical records, insurance correspondence, my mother's old letters. I spread them across the floor. Dates, signatures. I began comparing handwriting. The forged medical power of attorney, dated 3 months ago, had a signature that looked like mine. But the slant was off. The loop on the O slightly curled in a way I never wrote. I had years of signed contracts to prove my own penmanship. I scanned the forged one and emailed it to Fiona. By the time we spoke that afternoon, she had already filed a preliminary injunction to delay any action on the conservatorship. That bought me time, barely. Because by nightfall, another visitor arrived. A man in a dark suit with a practiced smile, flanked by a nurse and a hospital administrator. "We're here for an evaluation," he announced. Court-ordered psychological review. Dr. Whitfield had filed a recommendation for immediate assessment due to concerns over potential self-harm and delusional behavior. I refused. I told them they had no jurisdiction. The administrator calmly replied that the request came from a guardian petition, temporary, pending review. My mother had filed it that morning. The nurse reached for my arm, gently but firmly. "You can fight this," she whispered. "But they'll say resistance is instability." I needed another plan. I breathed deeply, nodded, agreed to go. They led me to a private evaluation room inside the psychiatric wing of the same hospital where I had recovered days earlier. It was windowless, pale green, intentionally soothing. Dr. Whitfield sat across from me, her smile like porcelain. "You've been under a great deal of stress, haven't you, Olivia?" I met her gaze without blinking. "I'm not the one forging medical documents." She laughed softly, as if I had said something charming rather than accusatory. "Denial is common. We project onto others when our world feels unstable." She opened a folder. Inside were photos, my hospital stay, screenshots from Emma's social media showing me holding her children. Smiling. One photo had me dozing on a couch at a family gathering. The caption had read, "Praying for Olivia's healing journey." My mother had crafted an entire narrative. Even my exhaustion was used as evidence. Dr. Whitfield leaned forward. "You've devoted your life to helping women resist motherhood. Is it possible that you're simply afraid of your own desire?" I didn't respond. Anything I said could be twisted. She noted my silence. "Let's try a visualization exercise. Close your eyes. Picture holding your baby. What does it feel like?" I kept my eyes open. She tapped her pen. "You see? Disassociation. Avoidance." At the end of the session, she closed her folder and said, "We'll recommend a 72-hour hold. Just for observation. You'll be safe here." I stood up. "You'll need a court order. You're violating my rights." She smiled again. "Your mother already filed the papers. The hold begins immediately." A transport team arrived. 2 orderlies, kind eyes, careful steps. They treated me like glass. Or a bomb. I said nothing. I was walked into the psychiatric ward. My phone was taken. My belongings confiscated. I was given paper clothes and a plastic bracelet. The room they placed me in was sterile and silent. No TV. No windows. Just a narrow bed with a gray blanket. The nurse doing intake asked if I had a history of mental illness. I said no. She wrote recent incident of delusional response to family support. I felt like screaming. But I didn't. That would prove them right. Instead, I breathed, watched, calculated. When they brought dinner, I barely touched it. I remembered how my mother once slipped supplements into my tea. I tasted something bitter in the juice and pushed it away. Later that night, a nurse I didn't recognize slipped into my room. Older, stern, she handed me a folded note. "I knew your friend. She asked me to give you this." The note had a phone number and one sentence, "You are not alone. Hide this." The nurse left. I memorized the number. tore the paper into shreds, and flushed it. They would use anything against me. Evidence of conspiracy would be spun as paranoia. The next morning was group therapy. 6 women, a young male therapist, and chairs in a circle. When my turn came, I said nothing. The therapist filled the silence. Olivia is working through unresolved fertility grief. Silence is part of her defense mechanism. A teenager beside me nodded. I used to feel that way. But therapy helped. I nodded back, mechanically. Let them believe I was breaking. Let them believe I was bending. Because soon, they'd see what it looks like when a woman who has spent her life defending freedom fights for her own. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on the hard mattress beneath the too bright fluorescent light and rehearsed every line I would deliver the next day. The only way out was through. Not resistance, not protest, not even logic. Compliance. Controlled, strategic compliance. If I could convince them I had surrendered, they would release me in time for the conservatorship hearing. That was the battlefield that mattered now. If I missed it, my mother would gain full legal authority over my body. And she would use it. The next morning, I raised my hand in group therapy. My voice cracked on purpose. I said, I think I finally understand. The therapist leaned forward, interested. I told them about a dream, fabricated from 1,000 details of others' stories, where I held a baby and felt peace. I described longing, regret, jealousy. I let tears well in my eyes but never fall. One woman across the circle clapped gently. The others murmured encouragement. That afternoon, I met again with Dr. Whitfield. She wore the same pearls, the same practiced sympathy. I apologized for my resistance. I said I was scared of wanting what I couldn't have. I admitted to envy toward my sister's joy, to pressure I had internalized, to wounds that made me reject motherhood before I even tried. She glowed. This is a breakthrough. Olivia, you're finally being honest with yourself. She typed rapidly, documenting my transformation. I asked about fertility clinics. I asked if it was too late for me. I asked if my mother might be right. She leaned across the desk and squeezed my hand. You're brave, Olivia. You're choosing healing. That evening, my mother was allowed in for a supervised visit. I wore one of the maternity dresses she had brought. It hung loosely on my body, but I rubbed my belly the way I'd seen Emma do. My mother's eyes filled with tears. You look so natural. I kept my tone gentle. I'm sorry I fought you. I was just scared. She hugged me. I let her. I didn't pull away. She pulled out her phone. Emma needs to hear this. She video called Emma, who appeared on screen in a hospital bed, baby number 6 in her arms. Her voice was hoarse but warm. I'm proud of you, Liv. You'll be such a good mother. I kept my eyes on the screen. I smiled and nodded. The nurse nearby wrote something down. They were all watching. I knew. I gave them what they wanted. Over the next 12 hours, I asked about the egg retrieval process. I looked at profiles of hopeful couples. I practiced breathing techniques. I thanked Dr. Whitfield for opening my eyes. I told the group I was grateful. Each word burned. Each lie betrayed everything I stood for. But the next morning, I was called into a small office where Dr. Whitfield and the hospital administrator waited. We've seen remarkable progress, they said. We're recommending immediate release. I nodded, calm. Your mother already scheduled your follow-up appointment. Blessed beginnings. Today at 2. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and smiled. That's wonderful. They handed me my clothes, my belongings. My phone had been factory reset. All messages gone. I didn't flinch. My mother arrived with flowers and a gift bag. Prenatal vitamins, she said cheerfully. I thanked her. Asked to stop by my apartment to change. I want to feel normal before the clinic. She hesitated, then relented. In my apartment, while she rearranged bookshelves, swapping law journals with parenting guides, I locked myself in the bathroom. I called Fiona. I gave her my credentials. Told her where the real documents were. The hearing's at 2, right? I won't be there. They'll have me drugged in a clinic. She said, I'll file an emergency motion. But you need to show up. I will, I whispered. I have one move left. At 1:30, we arrived at the clinic. The waiting room was filled with couples and young women in quiet compliance. The receptionist greeted my mother by name. Patricia, so good to see you. And this must be Olivia. We've heard so much. I was led away for blood work. The nurse smiled, chatty, casual. Your mom says you're ready. Very ready. I nodded. Asked to use the bathroom. Instead, I slipped through a side hallway and out an emergency exit. I ordered a rideshare, ducked into the car, and told the driver to floor it. At 2:25, I burst into the courtroom. My hair was windblown, my dress wrinkled, my breath shallow, but I was there. The judge looked up, startled. Miss Bennett, are you here of your own will? Yes, Your Honor. I want to contest the conservatorship. My mother's face turned to ash. She stood from the petitioner's table. She's unwell. She ran from treatment. My colleague Rosé. Your Honor, we have evidence, fraudulent medical power of attorney, fabricated evaluations, and a pattern of coercion tied to the Blessed Beginnings Clinic. The judge reviewed the files, his expression darkening. When it was my turn, I stood straight. I am not grieving my fertility. I am grieving the fact that my mother sees my womb as her property. I described the injection, the forged documents, the lies spread to my firm, the control. My mother shouted, I just wanted grandchildren. I pointed to Emma in the back, barely able to stand, her children clinging to her swollen frame. You have 5 already, and she can't walk. The judge pounded his gavel. The petition for conservatorship is denied. Patricia Bennett, I am placing a restraining order. You are to have no contact with your daughter. My mother wailed. Emma turned away. The courtroom emptied. I stood in the hall, shaking. Fiona touched my shoulder. You did it. For now, I replied. Because I knew it was far from over. But I had survived the trap. I had turned the system back on itself. I had reclaimed my voice. And I was not done. The courtroom emptied slowly, like a wave pulling back after a violent tide. My mother sat slumped at the petitioner's table, her lawyer whispering furiously in her ear, but I could see it in her face. She had lost control. Not just of the case. Of me. Of the narrative she had spent years constructing. A bailiff walked over and informed her she was required to leave the premises within 15 minutes, escorted if necessary. She rose stiffly, still refusing to look at me, and left without a word. I stood in the hallway with Fiona, still shaking. My body was free, but my name, my career, my story, they had all been dragged through a war zone. We stepped outside into the blinding afternoon sun, and there, across the street, stood Emma. She was leaning against her minivan, struggling to stay upright, her 6 children restless in the back seat. I hadn't seen her since the hospital photo call. She looked older than our mother. Her belly was still distended, though she had given birth weeks earlier. There was a quiet heaviness in her face that had nothing to do with pregnancy. How could you do this to her? She called out, voice brittle. Mom loves us. She's just trying to preserve what we are. I crossed the street slowly and stopped just a few feet away. You think she loves you? Emma looked startled. Of course she does. She loves what your body can do, I said, not what you are. There's a difference. Her hand went instinctively to her abdomen, as if she were still guarding the next life, not realizing it was her own life that had been slowly carved away, one pregnancy at a time. Her 6-year-old daughter tugged at her skirt. Mommy, why is Grandma crying? Emma couldn't answer. She looked at me, then at her daughter, and I saw something pass across her face. Not understanding, but doubt. It was a start. That evening, back in my apartment, I sat on the same couch where I had found those dolls. Evidence planted to build a case that I was unstable. My space still felt haunted by her presence. The pictures on the wall were slightly off-center. My bookshelf reordered. The faint trace of perfume still clung to my favorite throw pillow. I lit a candle, poured myself a glass of water, and picked up my phone. Messages had flooded in. My mentor from law school had finally responded with an apology after reading the court transcript. My clients had reached out with support, some of them horrified to learn what had happened. One message stood out. It was from a young attorney I had once mentored. I always admired your strength, but now I understand the cost of it. Thank you for surviving. I replied with 2 words, still standing. Over the next few weeks, I filed formal complaints with the state medical board, naming Dr. Whitfield and several employees at Blessed Beginnings. Detective Hale assisted in connecting the dots with previous cases. Patterns emerged. Intake paperwork handled by my mother. Mental health evaluations expedited under dubious conditions. Young women from religious or conservative homes who suddenly became willing surrogates after family referrals. It was a web, well-dressed, polite, and perfectly disguised as compassion. The clinic's license was suspended pending investigation. Lawsuits began forming. I joined one of them. Civil damages, malpractice, fraud, coercion. The system that had nearly destroyed me would now be forced to account for itself. My mother tried to contact me through every possible channel. Former neighbors, old teachers, even my childhood priest. She left voicemails crying, begging, sometimes threatening. Each time, I forwarded the messages to my attorney and added them to the restraining order file. I never responded. I wouldn't give her the pleasure of thinking she still had access. Then, 6 weeks after the hearing, I got the news. Emma had nearly died giving birth to her 6th child. Her uterus had ruptured. Emergency surgery saved her life, but the doctors said it was over. No more children, no more carrying. Her body had reached its limit. I wanted to feel vindicated. But instead, I just felt hollow. I remembered the girl who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms, curled up beside me whispering she was scared of the dark. That little girl was gone. Replaced by a woman shaped and worn down by a mother who saw her only as a vessel. A martyr manufactured in silence. I couldn't save her, but maybe I could save someone else. 3 months after the court ruling, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Aunt Olivia? The voice was small, hesitant. It's Emma's daughter, the 6-year-old. Her name was Emma too, named after her mother. She said, "Grandma says I'm going to be a wonderful mother someday. But I told her I want to be a lawyer like you. Is that okay?" My chest tightened. My voice caught. "That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's brave." There was a pause. "Can I come see you sometime? Mommy says you're dangerous, but you don't sound dangerous." I blinked back tears. "I'd love that, but only if your mommy says yes." "She won't," the girl whispered. "But I'll call again." She hung up. And in that moment, something shifted. The cycle was not fully broken, but it had cracked. The next generation had seen the truth. And that was how change begins. Quietly, one voice at a time. A year passed, not quickly. It moved like molasses, slow, sticky, unpredictable. Healing isn't a straight line, and neither is rebuilding a life after it's been hijacked. But slowly, I began to reclaim myself. I returned to work. My firm welcomed me back after a long and careful explanation of everything that had happened. The partners, initially cautious, had read the court documents, the witness statements, the medical reports. Eventually, they understood. A few colleagues still looked at me with sideways pity. Others avoided the topic entirely. But the clients, the women I had once defended, guided, protected, understood in a way no one else could. Some of them wrote to me. Some just hugged me, hard, when I returned to courtrooms and consultations. None of them asked if I wanted kids. They knew better. They knew that was never the point. I began giving talks again. Lectures at law schools. Panels on medical ethics. I was invited to speak on a national podcast about reproductive coercion. My voice had changed. Less precise, more personal. People listened differently now. I was no longer just a lawyer. I was a case study. A survivor. A warning. And I used that attention to push for change. With Fiona and Detective Hale's support, we helped launch an advocacy network for victims of familial fertility coercion. We called it Unwritten Futures. Within months, dozens of women came forward. Their stories varied in detail but shared the same bones. Mothers, sisters, partners who masked control as love. Clinics that turned a blind eye in the name of miracles. Systems that valued eggs over consent. We gathered affidavits. We petitioned medical boards. We lobbied for new legislation requiring independent legal counsel for all surrogate or donor agreements involving family members. It wasn't fast. It wasn't flashy. But it was working. One rainy evening, as I was leaving a speaking event at a university in Oregon, a young woman approached me. She looked familiar in that way women often do, tired eyes, tense shoulders, polite smile hiding something deeper. She said, "You're Olivia Bennett. You helped my friend escape her family. They were going to force her to carry a child for her older sister." I nodded. I remember her. Is she okay now? She is, the woman replied. And because of her, I started questioning everything. I'm supposed to start fertility treatments next month. My mom says it'll bring me purpose. But now I'm not so sure. I reached into my bag and handed her my card. You already have purpose. You don't need pain to prove it. She clutched the card like it was oxygen and walked away. I stood there in the drizzle, coat collar pulled up, and let myself feel the quiet satisfaction. The smallest acts can prevent the largest tragedies. Emma never called me again. She sent a letter, once. Handwritten, apologizing in the vague language of someone not quite ready to confront the full weight of their choices. She said she hoped I'd forgive her one day. She included a photo of her children lined up on the porch, forced smiles under matching sweaters. I didn't write back, not because I hated her, but because I didn't trust her. And forgiveness doesn't always require contact. As for my mother, she violated the restraining order twice. Once through a mutual cousin, once through a fake Instagram account that messaged me your eggs are still viable. Both incidents were documented and added to her record. Last I heard, she lost her job at Blessed Beginnings. The clinic had shut down amid the investigation, and no other facility wanted the liability. She faded into the margins. Whispers, a cautionary tale, a name that made people shift uncomfortably at dinner parties. And that was enough for me. One afternoon, I was cleaning out old files from my apartment when I came across the journal she had given me during my psychiatric hold. My fertility journey, the cover read. I opened it. The first several pages were filled with writing that mimicked mine but wasn't mine. Lists of names, reflections on hopeful motherhood, affirmations scrawled in neat, unnatural loops. I am made to nurture. I am meant to create. I stared at those pages for a long time. Then I lit a match, walked to my balcony, and let the flames consume it page by page. The smoke curled into the sky like an unspoken prayer. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from a contact labeled simply, E the little girl. Emma's daughter. Grandma says I'm too sensitive. But I told her you said that's my superpower. Is that true? I smiled and typed back, absolutely. Don't let anyone convince you to turn your softness into silence. She replied, I won't. I promise. I looked out over the city, the sky streaked in gold and violet. The war wasn't over. It never really is when family is involved. But the battle had been won. Boundaries had been set, and somewhere out there, a girl was learning she had a choice. That had to be enough, for now.